I'm quite convinced that roll-up wouldn't solve the problem, for instance, with sandwich panels.
We go to fact first, Leonard.
Yes. Why was time to flashover taken to be the fire hazard?
I do believe that's because, based on fire statistics, more people die when fires actually go to flashover in the room of origin.
I think I'd question that one. Yeah.
And this is without furnishing. This is an unfurnished room.
For the test purpose here, that's an unfurnished room. Yeah, we're only talking about construction products.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that the unfortunate aspect of that is that flashover in itself is one of the phenomena that is most compounded between environmental, geometrical variables, and the material itself. So really, the time to flashover is just a smudge of all these things. And the moment you change the geometry, you have no idea what the actual implications are going to be. And the moment you change even the positioning of the material, you have no idea what the implications are going to be. And so I think that to some extent, one of the problems that I really see with the SBI is the fact that it uses a variable, which is time to flashover, that maybe has some basis on the reality of the hazard. But the problem is that, as it is a very dirty variable that compounds the parameters of the test with the parameters of the sample that we're being tested.
That I completely understand what you're saying, and you have to remember it's related to the time to flashover in the room corner test. I mean, you can't transfer the time to flashover in the room corner test to time to flashover in an actual room.
No,
it's still a model.
The time to flashover in the room corner test was there to represent the time to flashover in
a small. Yes, that's the model. Okay. That's the model you have. Yeah, that's the model it's based on.
Yes. Right here.
Thanks. I suppose it's about time I put my head above the parapet, but speaking as a Scottish fire regulator, 2 points really. One is it possible for, say, a structurally insulated panel to have a board, a fire-rated board bonded to it, to be classified, first of all, as a product, which could then go into the espionage test and achieve a classification A1 or A2? That's the first question. And the second question is, as a fire regulator, is a solution to the problem potentially for us to classify the nature of escape routes or whatever parts of the construction we want as Euro class A1, A2? Because you mentioned there the sandwich panels obviously achieving a maximum of class B.
Yes, and the reason for the maximum of class B is if you want to go into class A1 and A2, there you're suddenly entering into the field of material testing. So the only way you can have a class A, and you never get an A1 panel because of the glue that's used in panels, but you can get an A2 panel if you use a non-combustible core product in the panel. But your other was that you could change the regulations then to a class A1 and A2. That's right, that's the only way you can be absolutely sure of what you have all the way in through your product. I think the solution, I've always argued, I think the solution to the product is to go back and look at an appropriate large-scale test, because you cannot find or determine the fire behavior of a sandwich panel in a small-scale test. Because what determines the fire behavior of the panel is how the panel moves in the fire, joints opening up, etc., etc. So I believe the only right way to do it is to look at an appropriate large-scale test.
Yeah, to go back to the question that I was put earlier about using the time to flashover, and you combine and said, to do the statistics, the number of people who died in fires. Well, that really doesn't hold water, because the vast majority of people who die in fires are dead long before flashover ever occurs.
It was funny, because I've just been to a conference in London, and that was part of the discussion too, because the US statistics showed that about 75% of fire deaths occur after there's been flashover. But the people did not die in the room of flashover. They died far away from the smoke inhalation.
Right. Yes.
So it's just because in the instant you have the flashover in the room of origin, you have much faster fire spread, you have the whole smoke production changes, etc., etc. But representatives from UK argued that in the UK that was not the case, that several people die actually in fires where there hasn't been any flashover.
In the earlier espionage stuff, question was asked by the Commission. We're trying to get some progress out of this bunch of very disparate people from various member states. What are you trying to achieve? You know, all sorts of different levels of scientific, technical, or otherwise ability were represented around the table. And one thing was something like a waste paper basket fire looks good for a fairly small salt. And the other one was this feeling, as you just described, that if a fire does go to flashover, you've got a much more serious generator of nasty materials, toxic products, what have you, in the building, which can cause harm a long way away from the source. So whatever the UK people are saying now, then we were seeing it simply as a manifestation of a very dangerous fire. Very dangerous fire. But there was no statistical analysis. It was all people talking endlessly around the table, desperately, and after months and months making no progress, trying to touch at straws to get some kind of agreement. Similarly, with Roland, it was on the cusp between whether Roland or the fledgling SBI were going to sort of win the day. And I think the feeling was, on the one hand, there were so many people in favour of SBI that if some of us had said, let's give Roland more time, they'd have gone right back to square one. And the other was a sense in which Roland did not constitute a serious enough assault. That different from the SBI, which was different.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, stop with back in the
Sorry, could you comment on the possible use of the LPS 1181 test? That's a full-scale test for sandwich panels. Is that an alternative, or is it simply a cost?
I must admit I'm not that familiar with the LPS 1181 to say if that could be the appropriate test, but I believe that we have to look into the available large-scale tests out there, and that should be on the list.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Well, we will have more questions on the panel as soon as we get our last speaker in. So, there we go.